My name is Maria, and you're listening to the podcast where we deconstruct someone's PhD experience so that you can reconstruct your own. This is a journey with many challenges, but you might find yourself in a similar situation as one of the guests here. Enjoy listening. Meint, thank you for coming and taking the time to share your story. Now, even that you are retired, but you still find the time to share your work experience. I would give you the freedom to introduce yourself.
I started work in 1980, work in optical communication. I did my doctoral examination in 1974, worked a few years in radar remote sensing. And then in 1980, I switched to optical communication together with Professor Arquette. He was then at the time from Philips Research Laboratories and a part-time professor in our group. And he chose integrated optics in indium phosphide as the focus of our group. So I started building up an infrastructure, the technology for making chips. Well, the first 10 years we worked on a passive material that was aluminum oxide on silicon, and we developed low-loss waveguides. We did it by sputter deposition. Well, we developed components in it. The arrayed waveguide grating has been developed, also MMI couplers.
That you are famous for, yeah?
Yes, and then around in 1986 we got funds for buying indium phosphide semiconductor equipment. So, and then also Shang Ui, you may have heard of him. He was appointed. He was a physical chemist. And he built an epitaxy reactor, and he built a small laboratory that was all in Delft. Starting 1980, we could start fabricating indium phosphide chips, and we transferred first the results, passive waveguides, also the AWGs and the MMI couplers. But we also worked on optical amplifiers and on phase shifters. Actually, the components that are still the most important ones. Well, starting 1993, 1994, we got a number of PhD students who started working on more complex chips. You may have heard of the cross-connect. Chrétien Herben, he made this, which at the time was one of the most complicated circuits that was published, definitely in indium phosphide. It had about 90 components, I think. And at that time I also launched Moore's Law. We saw that every year the complexity increased. Now in 2000 we moved to Eindhoven with the whole group because the government had decided that Eindhoven was the center for photonic integration. So we moved with a large part of the Delft group to Eindhoven, and then we continued. We got a very nice laboratory, the clean room that we still have now. Well, there we worked, we continued, but then we moved more and more to a generic technology, because in the beginning we adapted the technology to every application. And around the turn of the century, I thought that's not a good idea, it's too complicated, so we should go to more standardization in the technology. And we've done that. We got a lot of success with this generic foundry approach. The JPEX platform was started. We got a lot of cooperation and more projects and more PhD students. And then I think in 19...
This legacy that you have built in Eindhoven was also something that was shared with me via professors from the US.
Yeah.
So from Milan Mashanovic. When I was interested in doing a PhD, I spoke with him. And then focusing on Europe, because I wanted to stay in Europe, he told me, yes, this is the place to go to. There's Meint Smit there. He built this amazing group, and they're doing a great job in 3.5 materials. So that's how I came to Eindhoven, thanks to your legacy. So thanks, Meint.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
The reason why I wanted to have you here in this podcast is because you have a vast experience. You have this historical overview of how a PhD looked like in the 80s, how it looked like 40 years afterwards. What did you notice? How many people enrolled in a PhD 40 years ago and now? And what are the main differences in this trend?
Well, in 14 years, a lot changed because around 1980, in electrical engineering in Delft, doing a PhD was very unusual. So when we started with I got 2 technicians and myself and a part-time professor. In 1986, we got another staff member who joined, but until 1990, we didn't have PhD students. That was, so it was really zero, and we did it with permanent staff, and it worked like that in many of the groups. In chemistry and physics, PhD was quite normal. In electrical engineering, it was not normal.
Is there a specific reason for that?
Yeah, tradition. I think they were more engineering faculties, and there doing a PhD was less familiar. There were some, but very little. But for us in 1990, it changed. There were large money savings, and in the past you got the money from the university. And well, every year you got the money and you didn't have to do much for it. Well, we did a lot for it, but there was not a large drive to come up with publications also. So you had a large degree of freedom, but that changed in the 90s. Then it became competitive. We had to submit proposals, and then also they required that we get delivered PhDs. Many of the proposals, you got a 4-year proposal, and the normal way was appointing a PhD on it who realized the things you had promised. So in the period from 1990 to 2000, we had about 10 PhD students. Well, especially from 1994 on, we got a lot of publications also. So we ramped up very quickly between 1990 and 1995. And at the end of the century, our group was very well known through the world. I was invited in Japan and in Korea and in the US and Canada. So starting from 1996, I traveled a lot, telling everywhere how beautiful indium phosphide material was. Then in 2000, the group moved to Eindhoven. The group became larger because there were already a few people working in Eindhoven. It was Jos van der Tol, Erwin Bent, well known, Fuad Karuta. And from Delft, Xavier Leitens, he was in Delft. So Xavier and Chang Oei, he joined going to Eindhoven, and a few of our PhD students, and one technician, Tjibbe de Vries. He also came from Delft, and the other technicians, they joined here in Eindhoven. So there we continued, and I haven't checked the numbers exactly, but I think we got a bit more projects, and I guess that the number of PhD students at that time was 10 to 15 in the period from 2000 to 2010. And from 2010 on, we got more and more projects, and you know probably better how many we have now, but I would guess it's now in the order of 20.
Oh, yes.
20, 25, yeah.
Yeah, that's the order.
Yeah, so it gradually grew. So the numbers have increased, a very steep increase around 1990. Before that, we didn't bother at all about PhDs, but we worked on getting the technology operational, and we did it ourselves with the technicians. But then from 1990 on, actually the PhDs, they become the real engine, the research engine. And the staff members did more and more the coaching, but no longer direct research. From 1990 on, it hasn't changed so much. The numbers have increased, but not dramatically. I think in that period we had 3 or 4 PhD students per staff member. And probably it's something similar now. 4 or 5 maybe, how much?
Yeah, that's the order.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this change of policy. Was that in the Netherlands or in Europe?
It was national. Probably in Europe it also happened, but I didn't have a view on what was going on. I heard only in the 90s I got more idea what's going on outside the Netherlands, but up till 1990 we focused on the Netherlands. But there it was national policy. So in 1980 it was all very relaxed. But then the money savings started. We got less and less money, and the government pressed us to become more efficient, to produce papers, to deliver PhD students. So in 1990 it started becoming very competitive.
So it was also an external push to get PhD.
Oh yes, definitely. It would have looked very different. But from the university, the money was, I think in 1983, our budget was cut with 40%, the group budget. And I think later on it never increased. And what we got from the university, but what increased was the funding via research projects. And that increased every year. So despite the fact the university gave us less and less, we got more and more money. And that's, I think, still the situation. I don't know what's the budget of the group now, but I think when I left, I think we had maybe 50,000 or 60,000 from the university and 3 million in total. So
exactly,
yeah, it was less than 10%, I think.
Yeah, now
we seriously discussed from leaving the university and starting for ourselves, but that was a joke. And saying you can keep your money and don't bother us. But it was not completely fair because we also got the building and the lab, of course, and there was a lot of funding in that. But for the personal salary, it's you can miss it.
Now it's very much based on projects, so all the money comes.
And that's for a long time already. That started in 1990, and it went quick, but we got through it. And there were also groups who didn't manage to do it, but the groups who were successful started expanding, and our group was one of them. So we got more and more projects. And if you get more and more projects, then you can also hire more and more personnel.
And if you look at PhD output since the beginning of this push, so from 1990?
Well, there's not a huge difference. Also in 1990, publications already was important, and we pushed for that. In the beginning, the duration was a bit longer, I think. Around 1990, 5 or 6 years for your PhD, that was still acceptable, but there was already in the beginning of 1990 the strong pressure to finish it in 4 years, because most of the projects were 4 years. Well, then usually we had some overhead in these projects, and we used the overhead to finance the 5th year. So it was usually you did 4 years research, and if you needed a few months additional in the beginning, it was fairly easy to get it. And then half year for writing your PhD thesis, so then it was 5 years. The difference is not that large. I think now you really have to stop if you're funding. So after 4 years you have to stop, and you use a few months for writing your thesis. So I think it's 4.5 years now. So 10% difference.
In duration.
Yeah.
But what comes to mind is thinking about, for example, computation power that we have nowadays and the computation power that you had in 90s.
Yeah.
Or even the thesis.
That was not too bad also already in the 90s, but it is now more. But there I'm a little bit worried because, what I see is that with the modern software tools, I see a lot of people doing computations without well understanding what happens. And, you get a curve out of it. I really got some experience with the photonic integrated circuit design book that we are making. So I asked students to generate some graphs. Really a number of students have helped. I didn't ask for a single number, but for graphs, how, for example, the effective index changes if you change the structure. Well, the first graphs that came out was like this. And then I saw that some students, of course, they felt there must be something wrong. But as soon as the curve looked a little bit smooth, then they said, okay, that's it. And then we looked and we saw that for very thin waveguides, the effective index went under the substrate index. Oh. This cannot be right.
Yeah.
But I think this way of looking critical to your results, that was, I think, a little bit better in the early days because people understood better the physics. I think now they are what we call turning the numerical wheel, and what's coming out. Well, that's the truth, but I exaggerate a little bit, and it differs per student. But I think because you have so beautiful tools and you can do so much. I think we have to pay attention that people are critical. I'm very much in favor that people even do some simple calculations by hand. You can do a lot with some simple approximations, then you get a number, not very accurate, but your numerical results have to be close to that. If they differ a lot from what you do with simple calculations, something must be wrong. Has it changed? Yes, indeed. The tools are more powerful. But you really have to be critical on the outcomes. And I'm worried because I also saw that different tools give different results. The results can differ easily 4 or 5% between different tools. And we couldn't get them closer. And then they are close to reality, but not always reliable.
Now I'm totally jumping on the other side with questions. And I'm wondering nowadays, the burnout or dropout rate of PhDs. I saw actually the statistics the other day that 21% of students at TUE are thinking about dropping out from their PhD. Do you have any insight on how this changed in the last decades?
Probably it has increased a bit, but also in the beginning we had examples of students who dropped out. Although I think that in our group, and it has always been significantly lower than 20%. I would say it's closer maybe to 10 or even less. And I don't know what's your idea. I think most of the students, more than 90% of our students
definitely, I would say
finish with a PhD. Yeah. So we are between 5 and 10%. And these numbers are very low, so it's difficult to do statistics. But also before 2000, we had at least one student who stopped.
And now that the numbers are low, I cannot ask you for drawing a conclusion and saying what would be the main reason why a student would drop out.
Yeah, stress, but that can have many causes, but I think you have noticed yourself that in our group we have a fairly friendly atmosphere, and I think this helps a lot.
Definitely.
And if you have a problem, people are helping you, and that helps a lot. And I think if you have groups where there is a lot of emphasis on competition, that burnout rate goes up.
Definitely. Yeah, I have to say one thing that was very prominent when I joined the group was this group feeling that you could clearly see that it's something that was there for a longer period of time. It's not something that you can create overnight, but really years to build it and transfer. Even though people come and go for their PhD for years, this kind of group feeling stayed very much.
Yeah, that's also what I felt that happened, yes.
But then I have to say it's also because of you and thanks to you that you
have I played a role, but I think it's everybody. Without the cooperation of everybody, it doesn't work, of course.
And how was your interaction? Well, I know you as a group chair by the end of your career, but how was your interaction throughout your academic career with the PhD students?
Yeah, we have for a very long time, we had weekly group meetings, and there I had quite some interaction with the students. And then you can understand when the group gets bigger and bigger, we still have the group meetings. And but if you have 20 or 25 people, then the interaction is fairly small. I had always a few students which I coached personally. And there I had, of course, much more interaction. There we had an hour per week or something like that.
I really like that you use the word coached PhD students. Yeah. So what do you refer to when you say coach?
Yeah, coaching is you discuss, of course, when they start, it's approximately clear in what they have to do. And when they start, you give them directions that they can go. And so when they start and you see that they are struggling with things, you help them. And it's a common interest, of course, that they get as far as possible. What I never did is let them swim. That's a kind of philosophy. Eh? Some people think let them find out everything. But my idea is if you first have to invent a wheel, then you will never get a good car. So let them build on what others have reached. Eh? So I help them to get at a level where the group was. and from there on, they had to do it themselves. And then of course you encounter a lot of problems, and I helped thinking. Sometimes I didn't also know how to solve the problem, but I have some experience, so sometimes I could help and say, well, try this, and that's the way in which I did the coaching. And for indium phosphide technology, it's so complicated that you know yourself. You can, if you have to do it all yourself, it's impossible. You get nowhere. So you always have to build on what others do. So what we need is cooperation. And I have stimulated from the beginning that people cooperate. And when they realize that they need others for getting good progress, this almost automatically creates a friendly atmosphere where people help each other, because if you help someone else to get a good result, it helps you also because you can use it afterwards. Mm-hmm. So I think the very expensive infrastructure that we needed and the complex technology forced us already to cooperate, and may also have to do with my Christian background. Their emphasis is not so much on being the best or being better than others, but more on serving your neighbors and your fellow men. And I think that matches better on cooperation than on competition.
But what you say, having a good infrastructure, of course, it's important if you want to achieve excellent results. But this does not per se create an element of collaboration. It's really as well about human interaction and how people are willing and open and feel safe and at workplace, and they know that the others are also there for the same interest. So there, as you say, there is no competition, but it's more collaboration.
For PhD students, when you start here, it must be very complicated and so much and so many things that you have to know. And actually, everybody starts by talking to his colleagues, and colleagues help you in the clean room. They learn you how to use the tools. So you start with months of cooperation in which your colleagues help you to start. Well, that creates already the basis for a good atmosphere, I think. And then there are also groups where there is a lot of focus. Where when you start, you have your own topic and you get your own computer and your own room. Then you get a very different atmosphere. You have people working for themselves, and what you try to do is to score very high in ranks. And in our group, scoring high, you can only do it if you have a good cooperation with others.
I love that saying. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Yeah,
maybe. Yes, indeed. And you see it also with the number of authors on our papers. It's really a disaster if you have to feed them into the library system.
So this was your worst nightmare. Well, recently I also heard a lot of admiration for you, especially in this period when the group transferred from Delft to Eindhoven. Mm-hmm. That maybe the environment was not so friendly and welcoming. Mm-hmm. So far we described what you have created for the people who were working with you. Mm-hmm. But how was it for you to bring all these people from Delft to Eindhoven and having to create a place for yourself in this totally new environment?
Yeah, well, that was a fairly complex situation. I can tell a little bit about it. So we started in 1980, building up the technology. It was essentially device technology, first in aluminum oxide on silicon, later in indium phosphide. In 1986, the government decided that Delft should focus on microelectronics and Eindhoven on optoelectronics and optical communication. We were not happy with this because we were doing optoelectronics and optical communication in Delft. And we had some discussions whether we had to move to Eindhoven. But Eindhoven was not very open to this because Delft got much more money for microelectronics. then Eindhoven for optoelectronics, so they didn't want to share it with Delft. So that was a nasty situation. And we had to decide, what do we do? Do we continue, or do we choose for something different? Now, it's never been in my nature to, just to do what the government asks. So we were doing a nice job, and we decided we go on despite what the government wants. And well, we did that, and fortunately, the grip of the government on the funding agency is not so large. So we still succeeded in getting more and more funds, and we got more and more successful with our group. But also in Eindhoven, there were two groups, the group of Professor Walter and Professor Koe, it's PSN and the Eco group, and they also did a good job, but they were working on materials and systems. And actually the three together was quite a strong team, materials, devices and systems. So in 1989, Walter and Koe, they started the Cobra Research School, and then we decided, although there was a lot of competition and tension between us, we thought, better to join them than to fight them. So we joined Cobra, and then we started, we went for new research funds, and Koe and Walter were very dominant characters, but that's very good for convincing policymakers. They were very successful in convincing policymakers that photonics and optical communication was the future. And then in 1998, we got a huge fund. We became top research school, and together, I don't know, I think it's 20 million euro or something like that. But it was still difficult. There was a materials group in Eindhoven. There was a systems group in Eindhoven, and the components group, which is the link between the two, was in Delft. And in Delft, we were not really at the right place because the focus was on microelectronics. So we decided then to move to Eindhoven. There was in principle money. Well, there have still been a lot of problems there, but in 2000, effectively, we signed that the whole group would move to Eindhoven, with which Delft was very unhappy, but they couldn't stop us, so we did it. And then, we started, or we continued in Eindhoven, but then we saw if you have a group with very dominant characters, this also can give some tensions. And a problem was that both Walter and Koe, they went for a really very not blue sky, but they were very much focused on research, new research. It couldn't be new enough. And our foundry approach, they didn't like it. They thought that's more engineering and we want to go for science. We focused really on this foundry approach, and they didn't believe it. And that gave a lot of tensions. And at a certain moment, I think they tried to get rid of me. I must say that during this period, I got the full support from the faculty board. So that's very helpful if you have problems with some of your colleagues. And I have ignored most of their unfriendly actions. And in the course of time, then it became clear that the foundry approach became more and more successful, and also on the work floor, we got a lot of cooperation. So the tensions, they weakened. And, as you know, at the moment, there's a very good cooperation between our three groups. Yeah, it has been really a problem, and it gave me some sleepless nights by sometimes, but in the course of time, then, they also saw, of course, that the foundry approach was working, and they saw the success that we had, so...
But that took also some years for them to accept it.
Yeah, I think the first 10 years were difficult, but less and less, I think. They saw that it worked. And I must give them the credits that the big investments that we had already around the turn of the century, that was mainly their credit. They were very good in fundraising, so we profited from that too. But it's always with very dominant persons. It has advantages for impressing the outside world, but for getting internal cooperation, it's often a problem.
Well, Meint, also now when you describe it, I admire how you managed to save your group and protect also group from seeing this external struggle.
It was very helpful that faculty was always they helped us. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult.
Of course.
If they had supported Janku, for example. They tried always, because he also had his merits, and the faculty wanted to keep him, but they wanted also to keep our group, and I think they did a very good job in keeping both groups together in Cobra and stimulating them to cooperate. What happened?
But still, you had to deal on a day-to-day basis, with the professors who are there next to you.
Yeah.
Plus with the
group. But with the professors, you have of course, it's not on a day-to-day basis. I think it's more, you see them a few times a month.
Still, it's very admirable how you managed to create a safe environment for your group, that they can do their research and they feel protected because you are there standing behind them. And this is the admiration that I hear from other people who said that if you were not there, they would have left. That you were.
Well, I never heard that. But okay, it's nice hearing that.
Yeah, so I really understood from them that you were a huge support. Like holding their back and really giving them the wings to do their own research, knowing that you are standing behind them. So
okay,
it's very nice.
Happy to hear this.
Meint, thanks a lot for sharing everything.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast episode. If there was anything that you discovered or found remotely interesting, do share. I'm always curious to hear what is it that you resonated with. See you in the next episode.